you can call one function inside another function. For example, there is a big task, so that is run by a big function, and there are multiple smaller activities in the same function. So that big function can be divided into smaller functions, and all those functions are called in a sequence by the big function. So in this kind of cases, a function calls another function. Let's say, for example, there is another function that is show country. I would like to print the output that is USA. So I am trying to call this particular function inside the existing function called show city. So in this show city function, I am trying to call another function called show country, but we are not calling this show country function outside. So whenever we call this show city function, first execution sequence goes to the show city function, and there you will get the output called New York. And then we are trying to call show country function, and from here it jumps to the show country function, and here we are trying to print the output USA. So we will get that output here. And once this function completes, it comes back to the same calling portion. So there are no more statements in this function. So after that, it comes back to the calling portion. So like this, every time when you call this show city function, you will get the output New York and USA. And we are calling that function 3 times, so same output gets repeated thrice. So here, the understandable point is that we are calling one function that is show country function inside another function called show city, so that every time when we call the show city function, this show country function executes. Let's check the output. So every time when we call the show city function, we will get the output of New York and USA, and we have called the same function 3 times. So we are getting those 2 lines 3 times. Let me show another example for the same context. Let me create another file called functions3.js. For example, we have a function called square that receives a number as argument and returns corresponding square of the same. So we will return the value of n into n. And let me create another function called cube. I would like to find out the cube value of the given number. So I am receiving a number, and I would like to find out the square first. So I am trying to call the square function and supplying the n value. So by this portion of this code, we are going to call the square function, and there we will get the n into n value. For example, the n value is 5. So we will get the value of 5 into 5. And then I would like to multiply the same value with the n. And that final result will be returned by this cube function. And finally, in the client code, we are trying to call that cube function and supply some input, for example 5, and receive the result value, for example result, and print the same. So we are getting the output here. So the cube value of 5 is 125. Here the execution sequence is, first we have created a function. That means the function reference will be stored in the variable called square, and this second function reference will be stored in another variable called cube. But the actual code of the function not yet executes. We have to invoke or call that function, then only the function executes. In this line number 12, we are calling the cube function. So from here, it goes to the actual definition of the cube function and n equal to 5 here because we have supplied 5 as argument here. And now from this portion, we are trying to call the above mentioned function, that is square. So from here, it jumps to the square function. That means it keeps that cube function hold. And now n equal to 5 because we have supplied n value as it is. And it returns 5 into 5, that is 25. And that return value 25 comes back to the same calling portion. So as of now it is 25 here. And then 25 into n, so that is 25 into 5, you will get 125. So that final value 125 will be given as return value back to the calling portion, and that gets assigned into the target variable, that is result. And the same gets printed in the console.log. So overall, what you try to understand here is that we are calling the square function inside another function called cube. Here assume that the square is a smaller task and cube is the larger task. So as a part of the larger task, we are trying to call the smaller task by calling the respective function. Exactly in the same way in the real world applications, whenever there is a function that performs a larger task, eventually it may call some other functions that perform comparatively smaller tasks. For another example, there is a banking application that calculates interest of a savings account. So there is a function that calculates interest, and there is another function that calculates monthly average balance of the bank account. So in the function of calculate interest, we are trying to call another function called get monthly average balance of the account. So the result of the function that calculates monthly average balance will be the input for interest calculation of the bank account. In that way, the result of one function becomes as input for another function. Just like the result of square function becomes as input for the cube function. This is how one function can talk to other functions in programming.